Hello, welcome back to my channel. Today I want to discuss the topic of active and passive voice. If you look here, what I'm going to describe to you is something that has to do with the verb structure, but also who is being treated with importance in the sentence, whether it's the subject or the object, and I'll get into that in a little bit. The active voice, quite simply, has the subject or the agent performing the action. And you might say to me, well, that's obvious. Of course the subject is performing the action, and normally that is the case. However, when we get into passive voice, you'll understand, hopefully, the difference and the exceptions to this, to active voice. So active voice uses simple tenses. I've put that in there just to show you that it's an easier construction. It's much easier, much more straightforward, to the point. It can feel stronger and bolder in writing. However, there are uses for the passive voice. Sometimes we want to use it. It can be used a lot in maybe writing in newspaper articles and that sort of thing. But active voice can feel stronger. The passive voice has the subject receiving the action. So instead of the subject coming at the beginning of the sentence, it's tagged on to the end, and I'll get to that in a little bit. Passive voice is more wordy, and it can be considered a weaker construction sometimes. Again, the English, like most languages, has exceptions and reasons to use certain constructions, just depending on the context and the situation. The next slide here is about active voice, particularly with examples and the construction. So I'm going to read the examples first, and then we'll go over how this is constructed. So we have the first example: I sprinted the end of the race with enthusiasm. So I sprinted. The next one: you peeled open the lid on the chocolate ice cream. You peeled, or you peeled open even. Okay, so the construction is the subject or the agent doing the action. So that's either I in my first example or you in the second example. You have the main verb. I have sprinted in the first example and peeled in the second example. And then the rest of the sentence tags along. It's pretty simple. Now, the passive voice, I've rearranged these two sentences, and they are just a little bit more awkward to read. Notice what happens. I focus on what was the object here before. In the first sentence, the race. That's what I was running. I sprinted the race. And what did you peel open? It was the chocolate ice cream. Okay. The first example: the end of the race was sprinted with enthusiasm by me. The lid of the chocolate ice cream was peeled open by you. Notice at the end I've tagged on by me and by you. This gives us who's the agent, who actually did the action. The thing that's receiving the action becomes the subject over here. So the construction is the object actually becomes the subject. So I say it's treated as the subject. It actually is the subject. But in real terms, it's the thing that's receiving the action, which makes this a bit tricky. So I've put object here, but it's actually the subject / object being treated as the subject. Then you have is, am, are, or so the to be verb, or you can have was and were, depending on if you're doing it past or present tense. Then you have your past participle plus the agent, by so-and-so, by whoever it is. So we have the cake was baked by Jane. Okay, the cake is the object. It's what was receiving the baking. It was what was having it had the action done to it. So that comes first in passive voice. Then we have the to be verb in the past tense here, was, plus the past participle baked, then by the agent, by Jane. Now, there's one other thing to note. Sometimes the passive voice will just take away the subject completely. So you could have a sentence like this: the cake was baked. It doesn't tell us who it was baked by, and maybe that's not important. The focus here is on the cake. So when you see a sentence like this where it's left off the agent or who did the verb, this is passive voice, when you don't know who did it. And this is used often. Like I said, you may come across, if you've come across any when you're reading or listening to anything, if you want to add them in the comments and we can discuss them, then that's fine. Thank you so much for watching, and if you have any questions or ideas for further videos, please let me know. Bye for now.